everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Around the Lens one-on-one interviews. I'm here with Christine Haughney Dare-Bryan. She's been very active in the film industry and has quite a few documentaries to her name. To kind of give you a better breakdown of who she is and what she has done, I'm going to throw it over to you. Hey, Christine.
Oh, hi, Dave. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am actually a journalist by training. I was previously with the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and then the New York Times. And in late 2014, I left the New York Times with an idea. And that idea was for a show about the intersection of food and corruption. And we can definitely get into this more, but what it ended up being was the Netflix docuseries Rotten, which got an Emmy nomination and a James Beard Award and ran for 2 seasons. I've also been in the Emmy Award-winning Netflix documentary Poisoned, which is one of the most viewed documentaries in Netflix history.
Wow.
I also created the Computer Freaks podcast series for Inc. magazine and recently won the IP for that, which has also received some requests for options and have been advising other clients on their video as well.
Okay, that's amazing. So you started out as a journalist, or you
Yes,
still are a
journalist by
journalist,
training.
I would say,
I
right?
am
Or
yes, I'm still a journalist. I contribute to Forbes, and I actually was just writing in the last hour. So yes, I am
no,
still technically a journalist.
that's great. How'd you get into journalism?
I always wanted to be a journalist. I came out of Columbia Journalism School and interned at the Wall Street Journal. And then I spent 9 to 10 months in Mobile, Alabama, covering drug running and death row inmates.
Wow.
And then in the spring of 2000, there was an opening to basically answer the phone and run to breaking news events for the Washington Post New York bureau. So I interviewed for that. I wanted to be closer to friends and family. And as a joke in the job interview, they said, "Oh, you can, get the mail, pick up faxes, run to disasters, and if the World Trade Center is bombed again, you can cover it." And I said, "All right, well, I'll take it," because the reporter in 93 had done that. And then that really set off my career because I was the first reporter sent in to cover 9/11 that day, covered all the Al Qaeda trials, and was really down at ground zero for the couple of years after that.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. And so you worked at a number of different organizations, and
Yes.
talk to me about how this kind of the documentary, how you got kind of roped into that, or obviously we were roped into it, but how'd you kind of get involved in the sort of the documentary process? Did they come to you?
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, when I was at the New York Times, I was getting a lot of requests for options. I just seemed to have like a love of like great storytelling. And I remember one colleague saying to me at the Times, though, the options really won't pay for more than a plane ticket for your mother-in-law to visit you.
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
you
Wow.
you really hear,
Holy
and I
cow.
want to really be like honest, on this show with you. There's a lot of kind of dramatization of the money and how lucrative these things are. But
Right.
so I was at the Times for 8 years getting a lot of requests for options, but nothing actually came through. And so in 2014, I was having coffee with a source who ran Saveur magazine. And I said, "Oh, I was on maternity leave and I was watching Anthony Bourdain's show." And he said, "Oh, I'll introduce you to the producers behind the production company for a show." So that's who I went in to meet with. And I said, "You really should do something about food and corruption," because I had covered a lot of corruption. I sent 2 people to prison with my investigations
Wow.
and had knew there was a lot of drama in food because my husband's in the wine industry.
Oh,
So they hired me as a consultant, and I just started at my kitchen table when my son was napping, mapping out stories of like that could be ideas. And so what we originally did in 2015 was we published 4 20-minute videos, super bare bones, and then I wrote accompanying articles.
hmm.
And then I started tweeting about them, and then I had a friend who was in marketing, and she got me on MSNBC talking about them, and they really took off on YouTube. And so basically what happened was by 2016, Netflix, which was really picking up its funding, they purchased those 4 20-minute videos,
Hmm.
and that became Rotten.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. And did they just take the 20-minute videos carte blanche and then, make them into the program, or they use them as like a essentially a resource to make a different program or a new program? Like they remix it or remake it?
they basically remixed everything and redid everything, and then it had to be shot on much better quality video. It had to be at a different standard. It had to have new lawyers. So I had done all this foundational reporting for what became the 12 1-hour documentaries, but
Hmm.
it started with these 4 20-minute videos. And once, I believe part of the contract was that they just took those videos off YouTube afterwards.
Okay.
They're nowhere to be found.
Oh, okay, right. Because they don't want to
Yeah,
compete with the originals, right?
yeah, correct.
Okay, great. So I guess, you were picked up for this documentary, you had your work optioned for it. Was there like a big premiere? Was there, big celebration around it? Or was it just kind of like it came out and then there you go. You had that little,
That's a
was
great
there event
question.
around it?
So thinking back, this is when Netflix was really just starting to invest in original programming.
Right.
And so there was no big debut when it aired. I mean, it was like a big debut in my house,
Yeah.
but there was no big premiere. That does come later in my story, but and it wasn't optioned. It became a full-fledged series.
Okay.
So, and for the series, they brought in a team. So it went from like me at my kitchen table to when we did the production, there was a 3 person team of us on the road. And then by the
Wow.
time it really went into full scale production for Netflix, it was like a 60 person production. When
Oh
you
my
go through
gosh.
reporting, film, editing, post, it was
Hmm.
a much bigger thing.
Yeah. So I mean, it really wasn't just something where you advised on. You were like a really big part of it, right?
Well, yeah, it was my original idea. And then I oversaw all the investigative reporting. One of the key moments, though, was when we were shopping it. One of the producers, I come from a very traditional news background, very rigorous, went to Columbia Journalism School, used to working with lawyers, have never been sued. And a producer, an executive producer came to me and said, these are great stories, but we really need a male voice to anchor the show because the reporting doesn't sound like it would come from a woman. A woman wouldn't do these great investigations. And
Oof.
so, what was really interesting about that was I said, well, okay, is it that you need a talent? Because I'm a reporter, I'm not a talent. And so
Right.
I presented a case like Katie Couric. Katie Couric is a talent, and she
Sure.
has a track record of, getting eyes on her shows.
Yeah.
And so then they said, well, we want to bring in Mark Bittman because he has more of an authoritative voice. But
Sure.
Mark Bittman, I love, he's a
Hmm.
recipe writer. He's not an
Hmm.
investigative reporter.
Yeah.
And we had a good working relationship. So they brought in a different voice for my reporting. And then what
Hmm.
happened was Me Too really happened. And so then they needed to bring back a female voice. So right before we aired in January 2018, then when they had the whole press tour, they brought me out. And at that point, I was about 8 months pregnant. So
Wow.
they really needed like a female voice behind these rigorous stories. But
Yes.
but it was a journey to get there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So obviously you put out this documentary series, Rotten, very
Yes.
well received. What is the James Beard Award exactly?
Oh, so for season 2 of Rotten, I got a James Beard Award for my reporting on the Mexican drug cartels and their involvement in the avocado trade.
Okay. And the
Yeah.
series ran for 2 seasons?
Yes, the first season aired in January 2018, and then I was supposed to come back in the summer of 2018 for us to debut the second season.
Hmm.
The day that I was supposed to basically sign my contract to go back, Anthony Bourdain took his life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I bring this up just because of the ups and downs of documentaries. So there's suddenly more money, then there's more drama. We're
Hmm.
this kind of small thing, and then we're this big name thing because we're doing well.
Right.
And so we really worked through season 2 with I want to say fewer resources, like because his show ended abruptly. I don't think they paid them out until there's a delay in payment until you complete a show, and when your talent has died, it actually becomes like an economic issue for the company.
Right.
So we worked very lean that time. I think there were certain moments where we didn't even have functioning heat, and
Wow.
we were producing 6 1-hour documentaries that were being produced globally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Was there ever any talk of a third season, or did Anthony Bourdain's death kind of kill that?
Um, he was not involved in our show, but he was the cornerstone of the production company's work.
Sure.
I think that was such a dark time for the production company that I was very happy to like put a bow on that and walk
Hmm.
forward, move forward to new projects.
Sure, absolutely. And you did walk forward to new projects to include
Yes,
Poisoned. Tell me a little bit about that
yes.
documentary.
So when I was working with Netflix on season 2 of Rotten, I said we really need to do something about lettuce, and I had
Mm.
investigated lettuce between seasons of Rotten for Politico, and they said, "Well, that's not really like, that's not like fun. That's not entertaining.
Who doesn't love
Um,
lettuce? Come on.
who doesn't want to spend their Saturday night watching a documentary about lettuce? I
I
get it.
know, right?
So, so I was like, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to make my own film about lettuce.
Yeah.
Well, of
Oh,
course, I don't
okay.
really know how to make a film. And then I was like, well, I'll write a book. And the book money was terrible. And then I was like,
Mm,
well, I'll do a TED talk. And they weren't going to
mm.
pay me for that. So the Boston Globe Spotlight team came forward and they funded me to do an investigation on lettuce.
Oh,
And they gave me the same resources that they had given to like their Catholic Church investigation.
okay.
So I started investigating that. We did a short doc for the Boston Globe on that. We also had Frontline that was interested, and then they like killed the interest like on the flight out to do the reporting. And but what did happen was NBC News picked it up, and they featured it on Nightly News with Lester Holt. And then from there, a separate documentary film house brought me in to talk about my reporting on lettuce for the documentary Poisoned, and that went on to win an Emmy.
That's great. That's great. And I assume you went to the Emmy celebration or Emmy award ceremony, right? Is that
No, no, I
no?
did not. I was not invited to that. I was invited to its debut at Tribeca Film Festival.
Oh, okay.
Another lesson in
Nice.
this whole thing is we filmed it and then it basically went silent. And then it was supposed to air on Netflix and it didn't.
Oh,
And then it debuted at Tribeca and then it went on Netflix and was incredibly successful. But I think with all these films, it is not a smooth path. You don't count on it financially, you don't count
mm,
on it. Um, to actually happen when it happens. You just have to kind of go with the flow.
wow. Okay. That's good words of advice because I think, there's this sort of maybe idea that just because you have been a part of something like these previous documentaries that you should expect to be part of documentaries regularly, I would think, or that would be like maybe a more constant opportunity. But it sounds like what you're saying is if it happens, but don't expect it to happen, right? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, I mean, even when Rotten got its Emmy nomination, the showrunner represented us for the Emmy nomination, not me, and that was during COVID, so it was something he just did at home. But this is very common. I remember someone telling me, and this is not confirmed, but that the Piper from Orange is the New Black was not even invited to the Emmys.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so
Is
there's a lot of like dynamics to navigate in film. I say that, they say there's glass ceilings for women. I think in these entertainment and documentary spaces, they're like glass walls and steel ceilings because we had these glass walls when I was at this production company behind Rotten. And at certain points, I would just walk in. If I knew there was a meeting I was shut out of, I would just walk in and make sure that I inserted myself to really preserve the quality of the journalism and the facts that
yeah.
we were presenting.
No, that's very important. Are there any other documentaries coming up or that we should know about or you're working on?
Well, I just finished winning all of the intellectual property of Computer Freaks, which is the podcast series I created about my dad, who's a founding father of the internet. I
Wow.
have over 200 hours of audio of the founding fathers of the ARPANET, internet, World Wide Web, e-commerce, and search. And so that has had some interest, but that's kind of a challenging one because it's like basically 200 hours of like white men talking and
Yeah.
and like sitting in chair talking. So it's not
That's kind of
the
like
most compelling.
that's part for the course when it comes to podcasts. As
Right.
someone who runs his own podcast. But
Yeah, I was at a drinks with all these women in film, and this woman I adore from Netflix, someone said like, why hasn't that been optioned? And I was like, because it's all white men sitting in chairs. And she just like politely nodded. And then I have another project I'm working on right now for a podcast that I can't say as much about, but have been working on that and its potential for option.
yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of movies come out recently that deal with, I would say, early era computers, obviously Apple and kind of
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, right, and his rise to fame. There was a movie about Tetris, the video game, that came out, I
Yes,
think
I
on
loved that one.
Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could easily see something like a narrative film created around the development of ARPANET because I mean it's something we all know about, but it's not something we really like I can't conceptualize it, I just know that it exists. But like I was wondering, I'm sure your podcast goes into a great deal on this, but there's got to be drama and there's got to be
Yeah.
stories and ups and downs, and I think that could be easily told or well told, and I think in a narrative format. But I know narrative film is a whole other ball game, right? When it comes to trying to get productions made, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. And maybe someone listening to this will pick up on that as well, because there is that wonderful component of the 60s and the 70s and like
Mm-hmm.
the late 60s and
Yeah, it
all
would
of
make a
this kind
great
of,
period piece.
yes, like disruption on college campuses and then the role of the military. So you have this wonderful contrast between these military guys and these like hippies coming out of Stanford
Love it.
and, having these brilliant ideas. So there's so many elements that make great storytelling in those early days. We also found with Computer Freaks that there were the numbers. We were briefly number one history podcast on Apple,
Wow.
and we were being listened to by people like 18 to 22 and then like 49 to 52 because there's this whole generation of people who wanted to find out about the history of something they use every day.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Um,
And when you kind of had this idea for this podcast, because obviously you had the connection to someone who had that connection to that era, like what did you do to kind of get traction for the podcast to get it known? Where was the kind of marketing behind it? Was it just through Inc. or was there something you were doing on your own? Does Inc. own the podcast? Is that how it works?
I now own the podcast.
Okay.
I now own all the intellectual property behind the podcast. So this came about because in 2022, I was running tech investigations for all of NBC News. My mom passed away
Oh,
and
sorry
my
to hear
dad
that.
developed dementia. Thank
Ugh.
you. And so it was this like really demanding job, little kids, and this one-two punch with my parents. And my dad had asked me for years and years. He's like, "Will you do something about the history of the internet?" And of course, he's my dad, so I ignored him. Like
Oh,
I know better.
yeah.
And then I had this moment where I was like, "Wow, I need to do this now." And so another old source from the New York Times who I had written about there was running Inc. magazine. And he's like, "Hey, come on over. We'll find something for you. We can do events. You can write for us. You can edit." And I said, "Oh, and I have this idea for a podcast." And he's like, "Great." And so Inc. had the resources to get it going. And then I used my network, at the New York Times, I was a media desk reporter. So I was incredibly well sourced there.
Hmm.
That actually
Sure.
helped with promoting Rotten as well in the early days. So I was able to pull in networks and contacts to promote Computer Freaks on like CBS This Morning and to get us
Oh,
better
wow.
coverage and to get us better placement. And then even use like old school contacts, which then got me speaking at IEEE, the engineering organization that's so big to the tech industry.
Yeah.
So I leveraged that. And then I also leveraged my Netflix contacts to see if we could promote it that way as well.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And it's won
Yeah.
awards. Can you tell me what awards it's won? Because I honestly am not like familiar with podcasting awards. I should, but I'm not.
It's actually won a diversity of awards because it's won for like investigative reporting.
Wow.
It won SGPJ. It won Cebu, for business editors and writers. It also won for sound design. Nicholas Torres was involved with sound design, which was incredible. Also, want to give a shout out to James Jackman, who was the producer behind George Michael, and he custom wrote all the music for it. So it like won across the board.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank
I hope it
you.
turns into something because it sounds like it should.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beyond that, is there anything else that's kind of in the works? Maybe something or at least ideas that you want to kind of develop in the future that you hope might turn into perhaps documentaries or other products?
I mean, I can give you a hint to the project that I'm working on right now because I think anyone who listens to Computer Freaks would understand the flow of it. My dad was really paranoid about what the internet could become, and he was writing
Yeah.
memos about this in like the early 80s.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, why was he so paranoid? And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what got him on this path. And I was like, he had polio when I was little. So I was like, is it because he was just like a worried little kid after being so sick? Couldn't figure it out. And then my dad passed away in 2024, and my mom's best friend called me. And basically, my mom was a school teacher in Berlin in the late 60s, and my dad was working for the military in Wiesbaden with NSA, overseeing a communications network there. And they met one weekend when my mom was in Wiesbaden. And they got married, and they were married for 50 years. And my mom's best friend said to me, "Oh, did you ever hear about Terry?" And I said, "I'm sorry, who?" And she said, "Terry." And I said, "I don't know who Terry is." And she said, "Terry is the CIA agent your mother was hanging out with before she started being involved with your dad." And so that has actually set me on this journey for the last 18 months, trying to find out who Terry was, trying to find out exactly what my father was doing in Germany, and trying to find out like this whole world of web of spies of Berlin and Germany in the height of the Cold War.
Very interesting. Okay, good. We'll be on the lookout for that.
Thank you.
So besides your heavy work in journalism and documentaries and whatnot, you're also a media advisor. Can you kind of give me an idea of what a media advisor is?
Yes. Okay. So we had layoffs at Inc. in June of 2025, and I quickly started getting calls for people to help give them advice on creating their own documentaries or their own podcasts. So as a media advisor, I am advising Columbia Business School on like their communication strategy. I brought in a fabulous former colleague from the Anthony Bourdain days, and we created a series of 8 short films about Columbia Business School's work in AI and healthcare. Working on another series for them now. I've advised entrepreneurs on creating their own series to then shop. And then I've advised people on their writing, their podcast strategy, and in some cases, why they might want to just stay away from documentary entirely or film entirely.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Okay, very cool, very cool. And you also do teaching and moderating. Kind of
Yes.
talk to me a little about those other elements that you've kind of been occupying your time with.
Yeah, sure. So I'm doing a lot of the entrepreneurship space, which is what I was doing, at Inc., interviewing like hundreds of entrepreneurs from Mark Cuban at South by Southwest to Steve
Wow.
Case, Bank 5000. So I've been moderating a lot of panels and loving doing that. I'm also an entrepreneur in residence at Iona University, where I am teaching entrepreneurship, which is really all about storytelling. And then as an entrepreneur in residence, like mentoring businesses. So I have 4 small businesses I meet with weekly, and then I'm also now involved in their Iona Innovation Challenge, where I met with like 11 different businesses that are startups, and I'm trying to guide them on their storytelling and their business plans.
Okay, very cool, very cool. When we were first talking, you mentioned obviously your involvement or at least knowledge about AI. And I do want to get
Yes.
into that a little bit with you because I don't know if you've seen the breaking news about Sora and how they're shutting down that platform for AI video creation. So that could be a good sign when it comes to people's maybe fears about AI, but it could also just be, I would say, a false indicator as to potentially where AI is going. Because what I'm seeing a lot when I play with AI as well is that you don't necessarily need, the Soras or the online platforms to make this video. I mean, there's a lot of offline and local area creation tools that are open source that you can do on your own desktop. So, from your perspective, and especially because of your involvement with film and whatnot in the film industry, talk to me about where you think AI seems to be heading, in your opinion.
This is a fantastic question, and one that is changing every day. So last summer, when I worked with this one client, he's like, "I want to make a great, award-winning documentary, and I want to use AI as much as I can." And I pushed back against it a bit and brought in these fantastic, Emmy award-winning filmmakers, and they're like, "No, this all needs to be done by humans." By Thanksgiving, when I started doing this series with my Bourdain colleague for Columbia Business School, that 60-person production team was 2 of us, and we were working long hours, but it was lean. There are certain things that aren't going to go away in film. I do see some resistance from people where they're like, I would rather babysit. When I call them and I say like, "I have a job for you," they're like, "I'd rather babysit than do anything that is my work combined with AI." Um, but I think that there are strategic jobs that have to remain. Like you still need someone to be there and hold the camera. You still need someone to kind of differentiate the content. You still need someone to kind of work on story narrative flow. I do see price differentials changing, and I'm working on this day to day where clients, like my colleagues, are saying we need to ask X, and I'm like, we're competing against AI. And this one client said to me for a film project, everything that is being pitched to him, he's putting into AI to see if he can get it done cheaper, better. So I am pricing a lot against AI. And he actually came back to me and he said, someone someone suggested that what you do, I think it was like 20 to, they would charge 20 to 30 times more. So we're in this moment where we're like pricing ourselves against AI, but what we need is very fundamental. Case in point for speaking, people said I needed a speaker's reel because I was being asked to do a speech a week. And this is over February break. My kids are on vacation, they're running around, like total chaos. First person said I needed to spend $30,000 to create this video. And I said, well, that's a lot of money. I don't feel comfortable with that. Next person said, you absolutely have to spend $10,000 if you want to make a reel that will sell anyone on video. So I'm like, all right, taking care of all these other things. And then I asked a student, he said, with AI, I can do that for you for $25. And I said, well, that would be unethical. I'm not here to take advantage of you. I'm here to charge me a fair price. And he said, it would be unethical if I charged you any more than $25. So I see this kind of rapid change. On the other hand, I was in LA last week on this project, and it was busy. Like people are, we're all watching a lot of programs on streaming. And I felt like the industry, it's at this moment, the writer strike is over. Wildfires, are not burning right now. You do have the new Writers Guild negotiations coming up involving AI, which are very parallel to the negotiations at the New York Times with the union. But they're busy in Hollywood right now. It feels busy, and it feels like there's a lot happening. So AI is absolutely going to upend the film industry, but there are still things we need to be done. One last point: my 12-year-old decided to teach himself CapCut.
Oh,
And I picked him
wow.
up from a play date on a Saturday, at 4:30. My husband and I made dinner. By the time he sat down to gobble up his dinner, by 6:30, he had taught himself completely on CapCut. By 8 o'clock, he had created his first video. By 9 o'clock, he had created a video for his friends. And by the next morning, when he woke up, he had created a video about his baby sister. So there
Wow.
are like realities we have to accept at how much the industry is changing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty amazing. I've got my son, my younger boy actually, he's involved in Code Ninjas. So he's learning, all these
Oh,
different things about
wow.
making video games and stuff like that. And, my older boy, he's 11 and I know he's into, STEM and STEAM and, all these sort of like different, he wants to be a scientist, right? So I could see him getting involved in that, but that's pretty neat. Yeah. I mean, the kids are starting younger and younger these days. I was going to work with this 16-year-old to make a short film. And I'm like, this kid's like organizing people and like hiring people. He was going to hire me. I'm like, what? Like at your age, I was lucky to have enough money to, buy contacts for myself because that's the only reason I have a job is to get contacts. But yeah, no, I mean, younger ages are getting more and more involved. And the fact that, your son is that technologically illiterate, or I'm sorry, literate at this age,
Yeah.
that's really telling, and probably I would imagine appeals to his desire to probably want to be a YouTuber, right? Don't all kids want to be YouTubers nowadays? Isn't that like the most desired profession? They all they
There is
all
a lot.
uh they all worship Mr. Beast.
They do worship Mr. Beast, and there's a lot of interest in YouTube. And I mean, he reads The Week, and we have discussions about politics like at the dinner table. But we never have on like the evening news, even though I
Right.
worked for like the evening news. And he consumes a lot from YouTube. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Yeah, so I mean, AI is, when done right and when used effectively, just a really amazing tool for ideation and
yeah,
actualization of ideas. And I've, known friends of mine who have used it to create trailers, mock trailers for movies they've been trying to pitch. Like I'm a filmmaker myself, and so like I could easily see using it to create a spec trailer, if you will, to kind of like what you were doing to try and get attention or attraction or funding for a particular project. So I've seen that done a lot. And, again, it could potentially even be used in documentary, for things like reenactment or things like that. But I do wonder if there might be a caution there because, do you want to kind of sully the water, so to speak, when you're trying to talk about, a real issue, and then you're using generative AI to create video to kind of go along with that? Does that perhaps put within the mind of the viewer the sense that, well, if this person is making stuff up here, does that put into question the entire legitimacy of the documentary? I don't know if have you ever
That
questioned that or considered that?
it's a really good point that you bring up. And I don't know. I mean, one other thing that you mentioned that I was thinking about was there's a real formulaic component to trailers versus like the
Right.
way you might go as a filmmaker.
Sure.
And when my another fantastic former Anthony Bourdain colleague, I brought her into this project. I did the initial reporting. We created a whole pitch deck. Pitch decks are pretty formulaic.
Hmm.
And our client brought it to a friend and he said, "Oh, did AI do this?" And it's like, no, an award-winning journalist, award-winning, filmmaker did this. So maybe AI could work best in places that are highly formulaic,
Right.
um, and not in others. I just think there's overall a big need for standards in filmmaking. And coming out of the times to a filmmaking environment, that was one of the biggest transitions for me, is really making sure that the standards were rigorous. Because, if you were to not follow the highest standards at the times, it meant like you couldn't pay your mortgage. Like it was
Hmm.
the consequences were huge and real. And that was something that I really had to adjust to. And I had a fantastic experience with Netflix, the corporation, and their commitment. They had additional legal review, which was weekly for everything's all of our journalistic standards. I remember we
Yeah.
had a huge blizzard, and we still met in the blizzard for to review like the legal standards of what we were doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Getting to the kind of AI of it all and documentary, have you heard of the On This Day series? It was directed by um, Primordial Soup. It's a company that makes AI, and it's associated with a big name director who I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but
I
essentially
don't know.
it's these series of videos. They're published on Time, and each one is created with AI, but it's obviously not just somebody, typed in a word and generated a video. They're using clips that they've generated and editing it together and adding music and dialogue and all this sort of thing. But I think it's something we talked about on our show, and there's obviously a contingent of people who are just going to outright reject AI, whatever's created with it. It's going to all be AI slop. And then there's a contingent of people who I think are more open to the idea of AI and, maybe not have the sort of, I would say, standard or initial sort of gag reflex, if you will, to the product and can accept it for what it is. Like I follow a lot of AI subreddits on Reddit, and there's some really impressive stuff that's being made that's AI generated, but it can be entertaining. So I wonder, do you differentiate between AI, all AI is pure slop, or there is AI that's entertaining and it's like a legitimate art form that will grow if it's done right and done by, again, professional people who know what they're doing with the platform, just like anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, AI arguably has replaced me, in the journalism world, and many of my colleagues with the layoffs at Inc. last year. And
Hmm.
so I've had to really just kind of dive in and learn about it. I did a piece for Forbes last week about how AI can actually be complementary to artists. You have this aversion for many artists for it, but I've been mentoring one entrepreneur, and this is not in film. She designs these beautiful, like hand painted Nike sneakers that are being sold all over the world. And she
Hmm.
is finding that she's not using AI to create artistic content, but she's helping it for her spreadsheets. She's helping it for actually running her business. I spoke with another gentleman for my article about how he's seeing that AI can help um, musicians organize their tours better, so it can actually take away a lot of the business component because basically artists are all entrepreneurs in a way,
Hmm.
and you can restrict it to that and then really focus more on the art. So I guess I'm focused more on that, and there are AI things, like we were doing some edits for the short films for Columbia, and we didn't have people looking straight into the camera. And my colleague said, "Oh, There's AI we can use to actually make them look straight into the camera. And
Mm,
so there are ways you can use AI to tweak things. I use AI for all my like transcripts, when I'm script writing and writing. So it doesn't just have to be that AI is creating the art, but AI can help you as a filmmaker and artist with all these other not always very fun parts of your business.
yeah. Actually, could use some AI then on my film because I've got a scene where one of the actors is looking at the camera when they're not supposed to be,
Yes.
and I need to fix it so they don't look at the camera. But
Right, right. So it can be for tweaks like that. And I did speak with one entrepreneur. She basically moved to China and she's doing the equivalent of like short telenovelas that are
Mhm.
all AI actors. Um, and I guess if you take them for what they are, they're like short soap operas. They're not they're not Academy Award winning films. If you take them as pure entertainment and then that could be fine. I don't watch short telenovelas all day, so I don't know. But apparently there is an audience. There is a market paying for that.
Are you talking about the vertical video short stories?
These are like short videos, like 90-second
Like in vertical
romances.
format, right?
Yeah, and they're all like AI generated actors. Um, when
Oh,
I first saw
AI
them,
generated. Okay, wow.
yeah, I just started laughing because they were so perfect looking.
Of course. Yeah, I haven't heard about it being something where AI was involved in that, but there, as a filmmaker, one of the things I've see is a trend towards the vertical telenovela style stories, where again, you're drip fed these essentially 60 to 90-minute movies in little, 90-second spurts, right? And, people who are creating that type of content, they're still filming people and doing a whole actual production. But, again, it's in this market where you have a specific app, just like Netflix, but it's just for vertical video. So it's a growing market because we're always looking for where can filmmakers work, and but interesting to see like, well, if AI is going to do it, well, there we go. But I could see easily maybe marrying up like parts of AI with stuff that's really filmed practically because again, while I like it in certain aspects, there is a sort of AI sheen to things that's created with
Yeah.
AI, and it's it has a novelty at first, but then it kind of wears off very quickly. It's like a steep decline in terms of like willingness to want to watch that type of content. I immediately see it, it's interesting, and then I want to go back to like real people doing real things and not
Real
watch
people,
more of
yeah.
it.
This is like
So,
a complete parallel, I don't know how it goes to film, but I think in some way it does. One of my best friends is booking a trip to Normandy this summer, and we went to Normandy the last few summers with our kids. And she did an AI generated itinerary of what her schedule was, and it sounded like fabulous. Getting to your point that you're at that cliff, and then I was like, oh, but you don't factor in like, jet lagged children. You didn't
hmm
factor in like kids getting sick. You didn't factor in missing something because you're on the phone because your father's dying. Like you didn't factor in what AI couldn't factor in the humanity. So I don't know how that's going to translate to film, but you see these glaring gaps in certain places where AI is being used.
yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Great. Well, it's been great talking with you,
Yes,
Christine.
thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? I didn't think to ask you.
Um, I'm wrapping up my fellowship at Iona in April, and I'm eagerly looking for new clients. So please send them my way. Anyone who's listening, I would love to work with you.
Absolutely. What kind of clients are you seeking, or what kind of clients should seek out you for your specific advice or
I think
guidance?
I can really give you helpful advice and added value if you're trying to explore any form of like video creation, whether you should invest in podcasts. Podcast is like a hugely undervalued resource right now. I don't see a
Hmm.
lot of people like taking the plunge, and I think so many people are listening to podcast. As you know, that's like where I would bet on. And I have done a lot of writing, though. Of course, a lot of that will evolve with AI, kind of
Yeah.
replacing us.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully that kind of writing isn't replaced by AI. I know that is the fear that many people have, and it's real. It's real, unfortunately. But
Yes.
go ahead and tell us what your website is and where they can find you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. My website is christinehaughney.com. So that's ChristineHaughney.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Christine Haughney Dare-Bryan.
Okay, great. And we'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. Well, again, Christine, thank you so much for taking time out
Thank
to be on the
you.
program. It was really lovely talking to you, and I wish you all the luck in terms of everything you're trying to do in your future endeavors. And hopefully, we see a Computer Freaks documentary or narrative film in the near future.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
You too.